Well, good morning, everyone. I have 10:30, so we'll call our Academic Affairs Committee meeting to order. Happy Valentine's Day, happy Super Bowl Champions Day, happy Higher Education Day at the Capitol. This is a big day. So glad you're all here. And I know that some will be glancing at their screens to watch the parade, so I get it. But we're glad you're here. So just a couple of reminders. Please state your name before speaking. And if you're joining us online, if you keep your cameras off and mics muted until you're part of the program, members, please ask to be recognized if you have questions or comments so that those that are joining us virtually will know who's speaking. And appreciate Sam, that you're monitoring the chat and raise your hand feature. Very good. So with that, Sam, please call the roll and introduce our main presenters for the day.
Regent Lane is here. Regent Mendoza?
Present.
Regent Johnston?
Here.
Regent Ice? Here. Heather Morgan?
Here.
And Carla is not here yet, but she will be with us. She's coming from SCOPS. That completes roll.
Thank you very much. Members, it's now time to approve our minutes from our January 30th meeting. Accept a motion or any corrections. Is there a motion?
I'll move it.
Thank you. Regent Ice, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Great. Minutes have been approved. Thank you. Thank you so much. Today, we get to move directly to other matters, and we're going to start with Sam reviewing the academic program review framework. Since this is a new process, we asked Sam to come and help refresh us on what our process is. And so please take advantage of asking questions for clarification. Sam.
Okay. So the requirements for the program review report start on page 6 of your agendas. We have already done items 1 and 2 under E or I and II. The universities should focus on item E3, reviewing the identified programs and issuing a recommendation, either phase out, merge, or action plan. So I'll go into what is being asked of the universities. For any program identified to phase out, the institution shall detail a plan to reinvest the resources from the program into other programs and or services. So a phase out plan shall be detailed. For any program recommended for a merge, the institution needs to detail a merger plan, which will include how the merge will impact the FTE for both programs. And for any identified for an action plan, institutions are going to need to provide the action plan itself and indicate how the plan will improve the metrics where the program fell short. Either that student demand metric, the degree production metric, the talent pipeline where at least 51% should be employed in the region, or number 4, the student return on investment where the 5-year post-grad median salary is at least $38,050. A sample template is on pages 11 and 12 of your agenda. A template includes the analysis data for each of the programs being reviewed, so each university is specific to their university. It prompts the institution for the required information that we just discussed, the recommendation and the necessary details. So as a reminder, these reports are due to us by or before April 19th, so please send those directly to me if you would. And BASC will review the reports at the subsequent meetings. I'm not sure how long it might take, so we're going to try to do the early May virtual meeting, and then that gives us time at the May face-to-face if we need it. We're going to see. And then BASC will make the recommendations to the full board for the June 19th meeting.
Thank you, Sam.
Yeah.
I noticed on page 8 of our printed materials that we still have the March submission timeline. I just want to make sure that everybody is clear that we changed that to April when we met back in October. What other questions or comments, members, do you have, or Provost, certainly want to welcome your voice if there's anything you'd like clarity on. Seem clear? Everybody feel comfortable with that? Any comments or questions from any of the provosts? Okay, we'll see how this works moving forward. As we actually get into implementation, there may be some things that surface. All right, with that, I think we're ready to move on to performance agreements. Committee members, I'd like for us to think about this as a little bit of a mini workshop on our performance agreements. We know that we're starting a new process, and so this is the time to really think about what Sam is going to share with us from the lens of implementation and what we learned from the last processes that we want to carry forward into this one. So with that, Sam.
And we did talk a little bit about this in SCOCO, so I think the provost should be queued up pretty well for it. But a sample performance agreement is shown starting on page 13 of your agendas. It should include timelines for the activities and the projects. We have completed most of the items listed for last year, except for the one that does carry over to fall of 23, establishing the Gateway math courses. I'm afraid that might be, fall of 23, and it should probably be going into spring of 24, yes. I'm worried we might be needing to carry that over into early summer as well, because we have a lot of meetings yet to go, a lot of discipline groups yet to meet, but we will do our best to get through that as quickly through the semester as we can. The other activities, in addition to establishing the Gateway math courses, the Math Pathways Task Force is working on establishing the system-wide math course placement measures and begin establishing system-wide English course placement measures. Institutions should be working on the degree maps for students beginning in fall of 24 and spring of 25. The reporting requirements for the institutions for this year to be turned in by July 1st are detailed at the bottom of page 14. And that is basically, it's essentially a plan for academic year AY25. Plan to implement math pathways, including processes and estimated timing required on campus to create and approve Gateway math courses for math pathways into degree programs, and the list of group members to lead that work on campus. Also, a plan to implement the co-requisite math support developmental education, including the process and estimated timing required on campus to create and approve co-requisite math support developmental education, and a list of the group members who will lead the work on campus. A plan to implement co-requisite English support developmental education, including the process and timing required on campus, and a list of group members who will lead that work on campus. A plan for faculty and staff to participate in KBOR professional development that is outlined on page 14 under the fall and spring, fall 24, spring 25 semesters, including professional development for math and English faculty on creating co-requisite support and utilizing system-wide course placement measures, and training for academic advisors and institutional research folks on co-requisite developmental ed math pathways and course placement measures. So there is a report template that starts on page 17 of your agenda, and this is what we will be providing to the institutions to turn around, fill out, and send it back to us. It prompts the institutions for all the information I just went over. The plan and activities for future years, as well as reporting requirements, are outlined in pages 15 and 16, and corresponding reporting templates will be provided to the institution during the spring semesters for those. Page 22 also specifies the reporting requirements due July 1st of 2025 and 2026. Regent Lane had asked me also to share information on the funding tiers. You ready for me to do that?
Let's wait and see if we have any questions about the process, and then we'll go there. Yes, Provost Armstrong.
Page 20, this is for this year, I might approach that for Fort Hays in terms of that professional development goal. I know that there's a listing of things on page 14. Would you be able to provide us some support, perhaps on how to do that?
Yeah.
Based on what has been done at this point.
Yeah.
Professional development.
Yes, I think what we're looking at there really is the advising piece, and how advisors and, well, that's one of the pieces. How will we train or disseminate information to advisors on the big projects that we just talked about? Also, institutional research staff, they're going to be needing to report certain things, so that we have this data, can eventually get into the dashboard. So I imagine KBOR will be providing some professional development for IR folks. The advising piece hasn't been fleshed out yet. So, but I would think about that in terms of, people who talk to your students.
And so that's obviously our responsibility, driven by some of the system-wide decisions.
I think the plan is for our office to provide that. It just hasn't been fleshed out
Okay.
yet,
Okay, thank you.
if that helps.
It does, it does. I know that puts pressure back on you, but it helps me understand
What's
what we're
expected.
responsible for
Yeah.
going into this first year of report.
That was a great question, providing some clarity there. Thank you for that. Any other questions?
Regent Lane,
Yes.
I had a quick question. Both on page 14 and 15, when it talks about plan document that is to be provided either spring of 25 or 24. Or the template, I guess, will be provided, and then AY 25, it includes that, and the next one. So each of the 5 areas have a point attached to them. So tell me how that works. Do you have to get all 5 points, or how?
Perfect segue into teeing up that Sam was gonna take us through, so.
Yeah, and I have a
And
handout.
this is in draft form, right? Sam, I mean,
This is in
you're
draft.
collecting feedback from other groups on this particular.
This piece, the board did look at last May. So it's my understanding this piece is set.
All right.
But I'm gonna pass around the handouts if you guys wouldn't mind. And I don't know how well you can see on the screen. So,
I
yeah,
think Regent, you and I've had some conversation about this particular component, so we need to provide as much feedback as we can at this stage.
Yeah, I certainly agree. And then I agree the board did look at it last May, but I think this is one of those things that the process defines how you use the information as well. So it could very well change be the board's perspective changes as we see how this all results. And I think I follow the process that we've laid out here, and seems well thought out, and we can debate any of that, but I do think it's important, we also recognize after we get done, we pause and look at what we've got. Once again, pressure test, are we comfortable this is doing what we envisioned we were gonna do? And we've got measures that on the one hand support what we're doing, press us a little bit, but don't also set up any accidental punitive unintended consequences as well. So I think, I'm sure that'll happen naturally, but I think we need to make sure once we get all this in that we pause and try to look at it from that elevation as well, if that makes sense, Madam Chair.
Right. Thank you for that, Frank.
so yeah, the idea is that each project is worth 1 point or 20% of full funding that an institution would get of any new funding, right? So I think there is a possibility that that BASC could recommend that the institution be awarded partial credit for a project if, say, they didn't do all of it, or if, say, the reporting fell short. If the reporting falls short, I'm gonna work with the institution and say, hey, are you done? Is this everything that you're doing? Because this looks like it might not be complete. But I think it's hard to really flesh a lot of that detail out until we see what we're gonna get. Because I really don't know what all we're gonna get. I think there's gonna be some variation. I did talk to SCOCO this morning. I did indicate that at least for the degree maps, the expectation is that an institution will have a degree map for any program that is in KBOR's program inventory. And that's gonna be how I check to see if it's a comprehensive look at the institution's programs, for example. So this is just a piece of what will be included in what is a funding guidelines document. The funding guidelines document fleshes a lot of this out, and it is being revised to reflect this new strategic plan and to reflect this new performance funding model. SCOCO took a look at it this morning. I would hope to get it in front of BASC either by the next virtual meeting or at the March face-to-face meeting for your review. Then, you know, you're looking at the different pieces, you're looking at this funding tier piece. And this document will need to be approved by BASC and ultimately the full board as well before it's considered official.
So one of the things I've been wondering, and would welcome feedback on this, in our last process, we had a series of exceptions. Help me understand how we should be thinking about that as we go into this new process. And certainly I'll open the floor to anyone who'd like to take a stab at that.
So I don't want to preempt that because I think that's at the heart of what we want to discuss here, but just so I understand the state of play, when is the first time there would be a potential funding impact with how this is laid out? When would we actually be approving that and so forth?
I think it's next July, not this coming one, but
Okay. And then when would we have an early predictor of what that might seem like? Because if, I mean, back to the exception point, if we know a year ahead of time, we might be talking about that, then there's plenty of time to make adjustments and not need exceptions, but rather be in the happy place if we've all accomplished it. So will there be like interim points, we kind of know where we stand? Or?
I think that's a
And
great,
what you're thinking on that?
yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. We could do this differently than what we've done in the past. What we've done in the past is we've reviewed those reports, we've shared them out with you with, you know, the recommended funding level. You've heard cases. What I'm thinking maybe would be good is to start that first virtual meeting of BASC and having a sampling of reports just to look at, not to act on, not to make recommendations on, but just to look at, to see what you're gonna look at for the rest of the, you know, the fall. Cause we typically review those at BASC in the fall, and then the board will approve the funding recommendations February or March of the next spring.
Okay.
So a sampling, yeah.
And because it seems to me that most of the things that came up with exceptions, we'd have known those months ahead of time, right? If we're gonna say this measure's not valid for the following reasons, that didn't happen at the last minute. So again, I think any of that we can move forward, then I think all the better off we are.
That makes sense. Provost, as you've been thinking about that, and then also Heather, as you've been thinking about for community colleges, are there things that you can foresee that might create an exception to how this is laid out?
I don't know if exception is the right word, but we do have some concerns about creating degree maps when we don't have the full gen ed core, the extensions, the exceptions, the math pathways. So we're creating something that quite frankly isn't going to be terribly helpful for a student and could mislead them. We've got all these other changes going on. So we're potentially creating double, triple work and confusing things for students.
I think your requirements for students entering fall 24, spring 25 are set. You know, I know we're doing the program to program, and I know that we're talking about gen ed exceptions, and we haven't established all the math pathways, but math pathways aren't expected to be completed and established by next fall. So I think I hear what you're saying, because there is gonna have to be there will need to be redo work. So I understand that. I'm just trying to say that I think things are gonna be set enough to get that first set of degree maps off the.
I know math pathways was one of the things we discussed in our 30-minute meeting this morning. We've got colleges ready to do that today. And so how do the colleges who are ready to move that way, and colleges who may not move that way, and how does that impact degree maps? That's the only concern I've heard about sort of this work.
So what are they ready to do? Because if the math pathways haven't been established, how are they ready to move forward?
I think some people think they know where this is going and to start offering alternatives to college algebra.
I think that's great, but it has to be discussed in the discipline meetings, and the majors have to agree on it.
Yeah, I think there'd be caution to that they think they can foresee and then something changes that impacts that. Just some caution there. I hate to hold people back who are ready to go. That's wonderful that people are excited and moving, but I think you should be cautious about that. So you don't have to redo things that you thought were fine. Anything from the provost perspective that we might foreshadow as a potential for an exception?
Well, I think I'm just trying to think about how, like, if there's no rubric, how are we going to know if it's met or not? But Sam is always so good to work with. I'm not overly concerned about that. I'm just more curious.
So some kind of more concrete guidance on what would equal us an awarding of a point. Okay, Sam, how are you thinking about that?
I don't know.
Thank you for
If
being-
somebody wants to be an early adapter, an early turner inner of the report, so I can just start getting a feel for what this is gonna look like, that would help a lot. And I think, maybe too, maybe that should be part of our process. Anybody turning anything in early, I would be happy to share with Basque members, if the institution is okay with that, before we call it official.
So we could even
This
have
is Barb.
it without a name attached to it, so people could feel free to vet. Provost Bicklemeyer?
I was just gonna emphasize, I couldn't tell who in the room made the point about the relationship of these various initiatives and the roll down impact of degree maps and general education and math pathways, in addition to the number of other initiatives that we have going on, such as NIST. And that's not to mention the fact that FAFSA, for example, Federal Department of Education, isn't coming out on time and is impacting our ability to actually articulate financial aid to allow students to come in. And I'll say for KU, while we're also doing our HLC reaffirmation of accreditation. So I'm always worried a bit when we talk about the fact that redo, we just know redo is going to happen. And so we're just preparing for that, because these things all do link together, and these are contracts basically that we make with students about program by HLC definition, a degree map and a general education plan, and how we're going to participate in math pathways. So I'll just put and go on the record, I always worry when we're moving forward and we'll figure out the process later. And when we'll figure out the interdependencies and relationships later, because our students are going to come in and they're going to have very mixed messages. They're going to end up taking additional courses. We're going to get in trouble because they had to take additional courses because we didn't have clarity on their degree map and how general education fit with that, and how they were able to engage with math pathways. And I want to appreciate and respect that Sam said in our SCOCO meeting, and I did ask for clarification on this. Sam, I can't remember the exact name of the workshop that you all were just at, where Kansas was unique in the fact that we were implementing three massive initiatives all at one time. And I think you said we're the only state to be doing so. So I just need to speak on behalf of all the staff at KU who are running really, really fast, and the students who are going to be somewhat challenged by the mixed messages they're going to get and the lack of process that we have to clarify the dependency. So I just want to go on record that when we do have the redo, and when there is pushback, and when students are somewhat confused, it's not completely of KU's making.
Thank you for that comment, Provost Bicklemeyer. And you always are good to shine a light on opportunities for us to get better. So what would be a remedy that you would suggest at this point?
I would suggest that we get clarification on the process and procedures, and that we make sure we agree on those processes and procedures for how to move forward, and we line out, and maybe all these things can all be done in the record amount of time. And Sam, it might be worth you speaking a little bit to what you did here at the workshop, but and I think I can't say that I'm speaking on behalf of the rest of the provost, so I'd appreciate them chiming in, but it's not unlike when we requested clarity on implementation and timelines for general education. And I appreciate the regents and the staff working really hard to try to create that clarity. We didn't get complete clarity on that, and we are still spinning a bit for that. So I would just come back to say, knowing exactly what is expected of us, what the process is, what the timelines are for each step of the process, and those dependencies. And there's a great effort in the detail here. And I give a shout out because I know this is a combination of the regents and the regent staff in coming up with this detail. But it really is not just this alone. It is very much how it fits with finishing gen ed and getting pieces in place, and the degree maps and the NIST playbooks and everything else that impacts it. So I'd ask my peer provost if I'm standing alone on this, or if you're in agreement with me on the need for clarity of process.
Provost Arnstorff.
I agree, Laura, this is Jill. I agree, I guess with everything you've shared, and here this is gonna sound like me complaining, so forgive me if it comes across that way, but it's not meant to be that way. I'm just concerned that we have so many things we started all at once, and the finish line, the path to the finish line is not clear. Is what Barb has stated. The concern that I have about these items is very similar to what Heather shared on behalf, I think, of the community colleges, is really how the academic degree map fits into all the other 4 things fit into the degree maps. That's for Hayes, that's my biggest area of concern, and I don't want to call it an exception. I don't know that I need that, but as soon as we start posting things publicly, we should. I'm not saying we shouldn't. Those become concrete. I want to make sure when something out there that's concrete, it's going to be ready to be socialized. And I fear that by July 1, for us, we maybe aren't going to be ready for number 5. Not because I don't think it's important, but there's so many other factors feeding into that. And for us, it's also our system, our ERP, student information system. Programming that. So just fear that maybe came across as complaining. That was not the intent, but it's a concern.
No, it did not at all. So thank you for sharing that, Provost Lefevre.
So I also appreciate the opportunity to provide feedback. I'm trying to think of it from the student's perspective. And when we post our degree maps, as and it's a contract. So theoretically, we could post our degree maps today, and the students who enter in the fall would be guided by those. And then if we make changes to those degree maps, the next group of students who enter after would be following a different degree map. So it's conceivable that we would have multiple degree maps operating on the same degree at the same time.
Isn't that just like a catalog change though too? I mean, I appreciate the desire for clarity of process, but I don't know how we're supposed to get there. You know, like you said, you could put the requirements out there on degree maps for students starting this coming fall and the following spring. Those would be in place just like a catalog, because I think we know what all the requirements will be, right? Because we're not expecting to implement the math pathways and, you know, those specific gateway courses until later. So I'm just having a hard time fully understanding the
I
connections.
think one of the important things to know is from a higher learning commission perspective, when we post a degree map or a program or a catalog, a student who comes in under that catalog or degree map, the HLC tells us that we have to meet that no matter how long it takes them to go through. So if I know it just sounds like making a change, but when we make a change, that's a different student group. So we have to honor whatever it is we put in place for a student for as long as it takes that student to go through. And every time we make a catalog change, particularly to a degree map, that means we have to hold the one in place for any student under that, and then we got to recognize every other student. So, and again, I'm not, I hope I'm not coming across as complaining, to Jill's point as well. But I'm just trying to help people recognize these aren't simple changes, and they have massive impacts. And the amount of work that we have to do to hold those and then hold others, and what redo means for students in terms of the complexity to an advisor of which map or program are they coming over, the likelihood that they may be misadvised and have to take additional classes. I'm just simply asking for the recognition. These aren't simple changes. It's every redo and every rework is an opportunity to misadvise a student, and it's a lot of staff work behind to have to hold those multiple programs in place. So I'd rather take the time to determine the process and the interdependencies up front and say, this is how we're going to do it, and then implement it, because changing on the fly has downstream effects that are, generally unimaginable unless you're in the weeds.
I just want to appreciate the comments that have been made, and that's exactly why this item came on this agenda, so we could start thinking about how do we move forward in a way that makes the most sense. So are there any other items that we need to highlight here as we think about what our next steps need to be?
I would like to
Please.
augment what you said, if I may, Regent Ice. So, I mean, I don't think any of this comes across as complaints. This whole discussion is why Chair Lane wanted to have this conversation, because we've effectively approved we were going to have these agreements. And without this conversation, sometime later, we said, well, okay, how are we doing on our agreements? So this is exactly what we wanted to have happen. I would lay out a slightly different hypothesis, though, that I think when I wasn't on this committee then, but I think when the board approved this framework, it was a recognition that there's a lot of things going on. And so we tried to pick 5 things. We're supposed to be things that are already going on, so there wasn't a set of new things. So again, I think we've got alignment around that, and lack of rubric on the one hand is not a good thing. On the other hand, some things are observable, not measurable. And so I really think which I think was the source of your question, Madam Chair, which is we're kind of asking you, well, tell us a way you'd measure how we're doing on these 5 things. And if these aren't the right ones, then tell us what they are. I mean, it doesn't have to be nailed down to some decimal point of something else, but there ought to be some way we can say, oh yeah, okay, we're doing that. And because I think we're aligned around, we need to have a performance agreement, I think.
Right.
So that's
well, and again, Regent Ice, I really appreciate that point, and I want to be clear. I absolutely agree with the 5 items that are on the performance agreement. Absolutely agree that those are good for the students and for the institutions. My questions and comments, that not unlike general education, the challenges in the implementation plan and the dependencies and the clarity of timelines of when things can happen. And it is that aspect again that we're moving a lot of things forward very quickly, and they are all interrelated. And we do have, some recognition and evidence that Kansas is unique in the fact that not only are we doing all these three things all at the same time, but that we're doing these other things as well, and they all underscore and line up to each other. So I want to be clear, I'm not disagreeing with the fact that these 5 focus areas for performance funding are absolutely beneficial. The question is, in what order and what time frame, and how do we minimize the rework as much as possible, or how do we just get clarity on which ones have to happen first to roll down and not have to do rework, because that's where that's where we've been challenged, and it was true in general education and continues to be true for KU in general education, in terms of the detail and the rollout. So again, I don't disagree with the 5. It is the clarity of process and deadlines and order to address the interdependencies to try to minimize as much rework as possible.
So given that, then I think the additional implication I was trying to make is if we have alignment around these are the 5 things, then I think this committee would be thrilled to have you all tell us, well, if we were you, this is what we'd use to know we're making the progress we're gonna be making on the 5 things. And if, so again, if it's not these things specifically, then take it to a different level, but we still ought to be able to say we got something done in these timeframes. And I know you all are committed to that, and there's no question of that.
I appreciate that suggestion, and that may be the action that we want to take as a result of the conversation. I want to invite Provost Smith to add anything that we haven't yet heard. That would be
I
important.
just have one thing I would like to add is, one of the things that I've often learned the hard way during my career, making curricular changes of any sort, is, the decisions we make, and Barb mentioned downstream effects. Anything we're doing with gen ed, anything we're doing with math pathways, anything we're doing with curriculum, it impacts the registrar's office in a big way. These are the folks that they gotta make it happen. And it gets into the weeds. There's all kinds of really complicated things that have to be overcome to make stuff happen. So one thing I would recommend is, not just a conversation with the provost, but also with the registrars. I think would be very helpful and enlightening, so they can kind of share what the challenges are on their end. And because they're the ones that pull the levers to make things happen on our end.
Thank you for that. Provost Smith, anything?
Could you restate the question?
I know you were in and out. We're just asking for any insights that you would have that would improve our ability to move this forward in an effective way to implement. So if you have nothing to add, that's okay, since you were partially in the conversation.
I heard partially, I heard some of the conversation. I think probably the most critical component to me to make this effective is to move at a pace that allows for it to be built in a quality fashion. I heard some pieces here, because all these initiatives are good and all these characteristics are good. And I would hate for them to be somewhat diminished because we didn't take the appropriate amount of time to consider something. I don't know everything, and I know that, but I also know it's critical to get the various stakeholders at the table. Whether, I think somebody mentioned the registrars, I think they're critical. So are our IR departments as well. With what kind of capacity they have to pull some of this right now. And I think we should do this. I think going back to Regent Ice's suggestion, I think we can come up with things that would say this is what we think is moving forward. So I would just be, my suggestion is, yeah, let's do it at a pace that we know we're building quality. Because I think in some ways we're building it as we go along. If we can also then be in agreement that it's not done at each time, that it may have to have some type of revision or debrief how we got there. Be careful, because I think each of us may have some independent variables on our campuses that might be unique as well. I don't know that for sure. Just a thought.
Thank you for that insight.
And if I
Regent
might,
Johnston, hang on a second, please. Regent Johnston.
Chair Lane, well, thank you to all of you, because I do appreciate very much the concerns that you bring forward, because they're obviously legitimate. I do think that maybe when we look at reporting on this, that's a separate timeline than implementing the things that are here, because these are dynamic. These are ever going to be changing. So as we report on them, you can say, we're working towards these degree maps. We intend to implement the degree map at this point, once we have all these other things set. So maybe we're conflating a little bit the reporting aspect of it versus the implementation aspect of it, because I think that that's a really important point. Because as we report, I think that we will see that you're working towards this, which in my opinion is what we're going to show in the narrative. This is what we're doing to work towards, making sure that we have implemented math pathways. We've done these things so far, professional development, given the fact that we don't know exactly where we're going, this is what we've done so far. Good, you get your check there. You know what I'm saying? To me, that's how we should look at it. So maybe and you tell me, it would be helpful if we develop, these are the timelines for reporting, the timelines for implementing these things. We don't quite know yet, because that depends on how quickly we move on, the Math Pathways group getting together and telling us what to do, the English folks as well as NIS and some other things. Does that help, or?
Provost Arnstorff.
Yeah, I think that's kind of shaking my head. Number 5 is really the only one for this year on page 14. Would there be a probable opportunity to perhaps show progress on the maps for this academic year versus having more complete? Here's a technical question, but I think it kind of maybe gets to a potential solution or maybe a different interpretation of how I've been reading this. So that they're completed for fall and spring. That's the way I'm interpreting that statement. But for this year, the progress reports, those, given that the other 4 items above are commitments that we're all very plus, but perhaps number 5 is not completed this year, knowing here's so when the court has implemented we've had a lot of, and it's been great, a lot of back and forth about some of the technical details. And I'm worried that number 5 is we're gonna get caught up in a lot of the technical details around maps. And do we have them right? Are there things that we have wrong on the maps, and we'll have hundreds of them?
Right, that's a good point. So I've noted that as an area for more discussion. So I appreciate that that's been surfaced. Want to swing back to you, Provost Bigelmeyer.
Thank you. And I actually just was adding in terms of context here to the point, I think of Provost Smith about the involvement of registrars and the involvement of data folks, and want to recognize the importance of that group and the connection of the interdependencies and things that I think it's helpful to have these kind of conversations and say what's all out there and going on that impacts. Registrars are part generally of enrollment management group, which also usually involves financial aid and applications. And I just want to note that there is extreme challenge and anxiety right now about the delay in the federal FAFSA reports, which are challenging our registrars and our enrollment management functions to be able to do the things that they have to do in addition to the initiative that they've got to do, because we're not going to be able to tell students what their financial aid packages are for the foreseeable future. So I'm just not aware or I'm not sure that everyone's aware or understands the extreme challenges that are on enrollment management and registrar and data functions right now in our of changes that are massive at the federal level that haven't rolled out on time, and the roll down effect of how people are able to work their level of effort. So I just was putting into context, one of the reasons for this conversation is not only finding the challenge to address clarity here for our staff and our students, but that's on top of other clarities that have massive impacts for the institution.
Thank you for that. And I've asked Dr. Flanders to update the board today on where we are with FAFSA, recognizing the issues you just mentioned. Anything, Regent Mendoza, that you want to add to the conversation?
I was just, when looking at these 5 here that by July 1st of 24, I think those were written, kind of going back to Provost Smith, what you mentioned about independent variables. Every institution may be at a different level, and that's why these ones are worded as there's a process or a plan in place, but it also wasn't dictated that you should be at this point or this point, because we know everybody's at a different point. So I don't know if maybe some checkpoints where each institution could say, okay, we're on track, or we need to do a little bit more to get to this point. But I do understand the degree maps, and I guess I don't read number 5 as they need to be finished. I just see that there's a link there, and I know up above it's just a sample performance agreement, but the bottom one does say they're working on updating the degree. So maybe we relook at number 5.
All right, Sam, you've heard a lot. What's some key takeaways for you from this conversation?
I will look for any suggestions the provosts have to help define what we're gonna be looking at for reporting, checkpoints included. And if I could back up and do a late nod to Provost Bicklemeyer, because I did mention in SCOCO that the Math Pathways Task Force, some of us went to Anaheim early last week to the Dana Center convening of the states. And we learned some strategies from the Dana Center. We talked with folks from other states. And it was pretty apparent that Kansas is on an aggressive timeline for these projects, Math Pathways, Gateway courses, getting the co-requisite Dev Ed in place, and establishing system-wide course placement measures. Kansas is probably the only state on such an aggressive timeline, attacking those 3 projects at the same time on a system level within a 3-year time period. So having said that, I'm not sure how much can be changed, but I appreciate Regent Mendoza's words and several others in the room when they say they're looking at these reporting requirements what I'm hearing is somewhat flexible. Depends on where a university or institution, is in this process, so long as they understand we're on the timeline, a 3-year timeline in the end. But my question to the regents is, how flexible do you guys wanna be? Because we've got to know what the expectation is, so we can communicate it out.
Let me suggest that I feel that this item is ripe for a small work group to kind of vet through some timelines and options for this body to consider. So Provost, perhaps you could appoint someone to be part of that with Sam. I'd be glad to be part of that and would look for one more mass member to join so that we could really talk through. Carla, certainly need your guidance in this arena too. So Regent Mendoza would be glad to be part of that, Sam. So you're not having to work on an island with just so if that's our amenable to the other members, that's how we'll move forward. Perhaps can have a brief update at our May meeting. Okay, this month, February, March, in our March meeting, just where the committee is. Does that sound agreeable? And Jill, you got your hand up. Are you agreeing? Okay, thank you for that. We appreciate it.
I have a question whenever you have.
Yes, please, go ahead.
I just need to go back and I apologize for being late. I just have a question about HLC and Barb's comment. So the number 5 is for students that are starting for fall of 24 and spring of 25. Doesn't HLC already require that you have all of that very clearly laid out for each program?
Yes.
So July 1, most of the time, I just came from Scouts and they were talking about they want everything out by March 1st so they can advise the students.
Yes, we have to, but we talked quite a bit about how the individual items still impact some of work going into next year, what could count. We also talked about just the technical, I talked about the technical aspect versus what this link is asking us to do versus maybe what we're doing for HLC. It's a little different.
I think also the concern about making changes, additional changes, trying to get to a point where we don't have to redo so
And
much.
the 4 items above are going to change what's in item 5. Is that the concern?
But that was one of them.
So may I add you, Carla, to that?
Sure.
Sure. All right. Thank you all very much for this
So-
discussion. It's exactly why we wanted to bring this forward so we could think about implementation, regionalized.
I'd like to emphasize that again, if I may. So I hope this is helpful. I'm not sure, but I think when we get to the celebrating point, on y'all's list should be celebrating we added this topic, which is a relatively late add, because this train had left the station. I don't use those words lightly. I mean, these things were happening, so this level of concern, I at least hadn't made it self-apparent to me. So, we need to examine why that doesn't always happen. And I'm glad we had the conversation, because clearly we needed to.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate that. Sam, really appreciate your heavy lifting that you've been doing on this and so many other items. So we're ready now to move to a discussion on program to program articulation. Granted, here is another item that we're putting on our horizon of work that needs to be completed. So there's significant interest, I know, from those in this room and beyond in program to program articulation. And we all celebrated the success that our elementary education programs had with that articulation last year. So Carla's been working in collaboration with community colleges. I'm gonna ask Carla to start us off with an update on program. And Rita, you're here, you could certainly add where we are with the nursing if you'd like. And then want to invite Heather to talk about the community college viewpoint. So Carla.
All right, I just came out of SCOPS and gave this update. I think everybody received the email. Rita and I got together a couple weeks ago and worked on the 4 programs that we felt would be appropriate based on the number of students that are transferring those particular programs into the universities from our community colleges. And also just the needs of our Kansas economy, you know, nursing and social work were definitely at the top. So Friday, hopefully, I will have some names of some people that are going to work in groups. The 2 year, the role of the 2 years, when we were working on the elementary ed, we realized, is it an AS or an AS? Some of were offering both, so the 2 years need to decide which degree is it. They need to come up with an appropriate name. At our transfer council, I mentioned these 4 programs, and there was a lot of concern about the names of our associate degrees. So, and then, titling it and then getting it down to 60 hours. If we're gonna take 60 hours and apply it to programs at the universities, the programs need to be at 60 hours. And then the 4-year groups, and they'll work together as necessary, will need to be looking at what are they willing to accept to bring in to all of their programs? What are the 60 hours that they're willing to take all of them to award into their programs? So that's.
Can you remind us what programs you're recommending that we?
Business administration and the CIP code for that went out and said management and operations, nursing, social work, computer and info sciences, and then it was a general. And April and Sam helped me look at the curricular codes for those. And we were able to pull those, Sam pulled those from the universities. Those are the actual bachelor programs or baccalaureate programs that are related and connected to those. And so we know where we're going to end up. We just need to pull together. And then really the deadline for a document would need to be May 24th, so that we can get that to BASC and then to the board.
So Heather, you and I spoke, and the community college presidents are very interested in helping to pursue and even leading this effort. So how are you thinking about it? What would you like us to be aware of?
We had a little bit of a wider number of programs that we were looking at. We have requested faculty from each institution who either may want to like co-chair or lead a group or just serve on a group from the different faculty areas. So I think we're definitely interested in moving forward. I'm not sure that we understood the SIP codes down to the management operations and the sub codes. So perhaps we don't have the right person, but I think we're excited about these programs. We're also willing to work with universities on agriculture and other programs, secondary education, to move this forward. We've got this with the private institutions, and what we're seeing is our students are transferring to the privates at a pretty high rate because of some of these transfer ease things. And so whether it be ag or secondary ed, we want to just move this forward as fast as we can, and really want to value our perspective is we don't need the presidents to be involved in this. We may not even need the chief academic officers to be involved in this, but let the faculty who know what this is come back to us, and we could be the arbitrators of dispute, so to speak, and trying to get things aligned rather than trying to be the experts on something that we don't really know about.
What's your process for identifying those?
Today was the deadline, and I have some emails from some people today from our chief academic officers to nominate their faculty, and so then I'll put them together and try to do some geographic and make it fair across institutions and produce a list for KBOR.
Thank you so much. Rita, would you like to update us on the nursing we are with the nursing process.
I think we've kind of funneled it into the process
Into
that,
this, okay.
into this process. I do know there are multiple institutions at the community college level that already have articulation agreements with various baccalaureate nursing programs, and I think part of the initial might be coming together and seeing what is already established, and then trying to reach consensus around that 60 credit hour that would be applicable anywhere. So I think that would be part of the discussion that they would be having at the community college level.
Thank you very much. Any questions, Regents? No. Thank you for the work that we're doing, and look forward to doing this in collaboration together with your team. Yes, please.
In the future, these can be identified at the beginning of the year. That would be helpful. This is entering in a very busy time throughout the spring semester, and
Absolutely.
having 4 programs now to articulate, while it's awesome and it'd be great for our state, for our students, most importantly, it's fast. And so we have 1 identified in August as a board goal, and now 4 out. So I would ask in the future that those are identified as system goals earlier, so that they can be launched earlier than, it's gonna be March 1st, probably before I'm really able to launch.
Certainly appreciate that. Part of the energy around this is coming from legislative bodies who are interested in this and pressing on that. I think if we can demonstrate we're moving on it, then that allows us to be more in the driver's seat. But thank you for that comment. Yeah, I think we all concur. All right, Carla, we're ready for academic affairs update, please.
Okay, I haven't talked about the system-wide gen ed exceptions, so I wanted to give an update on that. Sam and I have met with the registrars twice and talked about the different exceptions that Blake has approved, and there's concern about the number of those. And I just want to clarify that the engineering programs have been approved, but the other programs are possibly an extension. There's just 1 more year to work on those. I don't think Blake is very anxious or eager to approve any more exceptions. In fact, that's exactly what he just told the presidents in their meeting, is that's not his game plan. So if you are wanting to go past that 1 year of a program that is not in engineering, that information needs to get to us by May 31st so that we can get that looking at for the year beyond.
Just to clarify, just so I'm hearing that right, the engineering exceptions have been approved, but all the other submissions are now going to receive confirmation of an extension of time to get them in line. Is that
Right.
extension for 1 year?
Right, they were approved for AY 25, and that was in the letter that was sent to all the universities. The concern with the registrars, I think, is not having that information again, and this kind of goes along with the degree maps. If we want degree maps for our students, we have to have those. I mean, it's an HLC requirement. So we're meeting with the Gen Ed Council on Friday. Our goal is to have those Gen Ed exceptions for those programs on our website so that advising can take place for all students, that this is the program requirement. And if you're taking this program, you need to have calculus. That's your course, or biology, or whatever it is. There were a few that actually had a course from natural sciences and from the social and behavioral sciences, but we want to be transparent. We just need to get that stuff on our websites. But a lot of that responsibility will lie on the universities to have that on your website. And then our website will link to the 6-7 universities so that the students can see that.
Any questions for clarity from the regions? No. All right, thank you, Carla. Any other updates?
No, we do have administrative help. I talked about this in SCOCO a little bit. We have, of course, everyone knows we lost Amy, but we're doing a pool of administrative assistants. So there may be people helping us at our different meetings, but it may not always be the same one. So we are looking forward to that, and that's when we'll get those exceptions on our website, is when we have some help to put some of this stuff on our website. Sam has taken the brunt of most of this work. She has been doing tons of it, so we're anxious to get some help.
We appreciate all the efforts to keep things moving and concur that stability with additional resources is critical. Yeah, thank you very much. All right, campus, my favorite part of the agenda is for the campus is to share good news on campus shout outs. Please, no more than 2. We know that you could list a lot of things, so we'll open the floor to anyone who wants to begin with good news.
I'll start. School of Business and Technology recently let me know that they placed 27 of our current students into internships and local and regional businesses. 18 of the 27 are located in Emporia, which is fantastic. Another big item, we had the limited be to 2. I could do 12, but I'll do 2.
I know.
We recently announced, made the decision a few months back, but we recently announced that ESU is eliminating the application fee for all undergrad domestic students. So application fees for that audience will no longer be a thing at Emporia State University. Very glad we could make that happen.
We are too. Thank you very much. Who's next?
I'll go next. We'll go in order. We could list 13. But a couple of things I think that were particularly good. One is our Kels College of Business just received renewed accreditation. I think that's very important, that's recognized, and those graduates will have that endorsement as well. And I'm going to share just an activity that occurred last Friday that I think is pretty neat. Our School of Nursing did a 4th through 6th grader day. In the afternoon, students signed up and came over and learned about nursing professions. They went through our simulation hospital and participated in some of the activities that were there, and it was well received in our community. I think that's the kind of thing, that extension piece. It's not only good community, it's a good recruitment tool as well. And a lot of our programs do that, but it was fun. I mean, the students got in there, so we got multiple benefits.
Wonderful. Thank you for doing that. Provost Lefevre.
I could talk about 15.
That's why the limit.
I'll keep it to 1. I just wanted to give a little update on our awarding of our associate's degrees. We've been awarding the associate for a long time, but we never really made a big deal out of it. And a lot of times students didn't even know. So this year, we actually had what we called a milestone celebration. We had 93 students who had earned that associate's degree. Almost about half of them showed up for our milestone celebration. Some of them brought their parents along. We gave each of them a little tassel key ring. And but what struck me was the impact that it had on these students. And they were so eager to share their stories. We had students talking about, because of the degree, of the associate's degree, they now receive higher pay in their employment. We had students talk about the associate's degrees allows them to be emergency substitute teachers. And some of them brought their parents, and just the level of pride and was very tangible. So we just really, really appreciate Pitt State for bringing that idea to the forefront. We absolutely see this as a retention effort that's going to pay dividends for our students. So.
That's wonderful. All right, Provost Arnstorff.
I have to say, I've 16. Couple quick things. One is our library renovation is happening at Fort Hays. Asbestos abatement will begin soon. And that's so exciting for our university and library faculty and staff, as well as all the faculty and staff across the institution are really looking forward to that finished space in 2026. And so we'll look forward to welcoming you all at some point to see that work as it's completed. The other item that I want to share is our education folks had a successful CAPE accreditation visit last week. Those visits are all now being, for us, we're done via Zoom, but there's still a lot of work that's involved in prepping for those. And so while the official report hasn't come out, it won't for quite a while, the unofficial report that was a really successful visit for our education program.
It's gotta be a relief. It's wonderful. Yeah. All right, Provost Bicklemeyer, and then we'll conclude with you, Provost Mercer.
Thank you. I'm happy to report, and I could report an infinite number of good news.
I knew somebody was gonna say that, and then it's gonna be infinity plus one here in a second.
There you go. That's for Provost Mercer. But at KU, Patrick McCormick, who's a faculty member in engineering, recently received the prestigious 2-year $500,000 research grant from DARPA, which is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency of the Department of Defense. And that grant is to research more effective ways to use the radar spectrum. And that's actually coming from the US government, providing support for research to promote sharing in the radar spectrum to bolster the economy and economic development. So we're excited to be leading in that front. And then from our School of Journalism and Mass Communications, Dr. Sal, who's the Oscar Stauffer Professor in Journalism and Mass Communications, received a 3-year $1.5 million award from the National Science Foundation to do research on employment and the use of employment to reduce rates of recidivism and providing digital skills to allow for employment, because that seems to be a barrier for women who are leaving incarceration. And the grant will do research, but also help women in Kansas and Missouri who are transitioning from incarceration, help them gain employment through a holistic approach where they'll learn how to navigate online job applications, secure housing, and develop job skills. And the digital skills training will range from introductory to advanced levels. And so we're excited about that program.
Excellent on both those counts. I'm just wondering if Dr. McCormick will be looking at radar that tracks the Swifty plane.
It's the geometry to figure out the calculations for the average human that needs to be complemented with the radar. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. All right, Provost Mercer, you're our cleanup batter, please.
Very good. Well, Regent Ice, here's your +1 to the infinity comment, right? I like to highlight our College of Veterinary Medicine. Some great things happening there. I think accreditation is today, and our accreditation team just left with high accolades for our College of Veterinary Medicine and our veterinarian hospital. So we're very happy about that, and we'll look forward to that report as it works through the process. We also have just received our first round of national board scores for our future veterinarians, and our students passed at a 90% rate. So that's the first test in the fall. 80% is the accreditation standard, and it is literally unprecedented that you have a first round score of 90% aggregate for that group of students. So we're very proud about that. And then finally, to wrap up veterinarian highlights, we have 6 students that are recipients of the Veterinarian Training Program for Rural Kansas Award. This was legislatively funded, started in 2006, with the goal of veterinarian care in 92 of our most rural 105 Kansas counties. So we're pleased to add 6 more to that program serving rural Kansas. So thank you.
Thank you so much, and that was very clever how you got 3 in. There's amazing things happening across the campuses, so I thank you all for sharing good news and keep that message going. So our next BASC meeting is a virtual meeting on May 5th, beginning at 9 a.m. And with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you all very much.